The only parts that were even remotely decent in the throne speech, of course, were plagiarized from conservative policies that we've been fighting for, and they've been fighting against for a decade.
Another day and another attempt by mainstream media to manipulate and twist the public image of conservatives to make them the big bad guys. Unfortunately, it did not go very well for them this time. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Be sure to subscribe, comment, follow, and like this video because that helps YouTube show it to more people. And my goodness, am I ever tired of the gaslighting? But pointing it out does remind us, one, how we got here in the first place, and two, potentially some good ways that we can try and unbrainwash a good chunk of the Canadian public. We're going to be talking about the throne speech today. How much did that cost? Backstabbing and some brutal call-outs that all took place on live TV. Also, I was the victim of a smear campaign, I guess you would call that, kind of. A fact check, funny enough, that included my name in the article, that the entire article actually derived from something that I said. If only they had actually checked the facts and didn't manipulate, omit details, and try to mislead people in the way that things are so very strategically worded. All that and more coming up today on Over Opinionated.
But freedom is something you earn every day. And that strength is something we need to reinforce.
But how do you
call me crazy, but in the history books I read growing up, it was actually our ancestors who fought and lived really, really awful and struggle-filled lives in order to secure our freedom. And now we have a prime minister who says that we have to earn our freedom every day and that they need to reinforce how that freedom is earned. What a weird little slip up that is. Anyway, though, David Cochrane from CBC had his, dare I say, wet dream, was able to interview his idol, his hero, his false prophet, Mr. Mark Carney. And they talked about some pretty interesting things. Have a listen.
Some frequency during the election was he wants to break us so he can own us. Do you still believe that's true?
I think the president, I won't look into his soul, but the president is recognizing, as others are, just how strong and free Canada is. And so if you look at the speech from the throne today, as you did, this is about investing in Canada. This is about building Canada, about making one Canadian economy out of 13. It's about nation-building projects. Each of those and those together give us much, much more than could ever be taken away by trade action. This is a confident country moving forward, and it's an exciting time.
Well, that's interesting because Donald Trump actually just finished saying, I told Canada, which very much wants to be a part of our fabulous Golden Dome system, that it will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate but unequal nation, but will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state.
Look, I do want to go through some of the specific measures from the speech from the throne, but just one more on the United States, because when you said the process of deepening integration is over, is that a permanent state of affairs in your view? Is that something about the changing nature of America as a country, or is it specific to this period under President Trump?
Well, I'd roll back 40 years since we're looking at the broader sweep of history, maybe even a little more. A steady process of integration, integrating the auto sector, as I mentioned when I was first born, then moving to broader goods, services, financial services, even some people talking as little as a few years ago about having a customs union with the United States. Greater freedom of movement of labor. That's not going to happen.
That alone is just very interesting. Well, that's not going to happen. Well, why not? What if it's actually what if it makes sense? What if that's actually in our best interest? There are dozens, hundreds of thousands of dual citizens. We are neighbors. There's a lot of interconnectivity between our markets. You're not giving up everything by partnering with them, our neighbor, a little bit better. The freaking EU does it. I don't why is that such a blanket? No way, Jose. So I guess what Mark Carney is actually saying is that we are indeed going to pay the $84 billion to be a part of what it is that Mark Carney has said that he is interested in by Donald Trump. The Prime Minister's office has been clear at every opportunity, including in his conversations with President Trump, that Canada is an independent and sovereign nation, and it will will remain one. Yeah, no shit. We know that, bud. Canadians gave the Prime Minister a strong mandate to negotiate a comprehensive new security and economic relationship with the United States. Blah, blah, blah. So dumb. All of this is just so dumb. And it is also kind of crazy that Donald Trump said he would give Canada a $175 billion missile defense system, but only if we become the 51st state. But as always, depending on where you get your news, this story looks wildly different. There are some headlines who say Donald Trump generously offers Canada a missile shield, and others are saying that it is Trump strong-arming Canada into giving up its sovereignty. Meanwhile, 80% of Canadians don't want anything to do with becoming a U.S. state, and Donald Trump knows that. That's obviously not the end goal here. This is called negotiation. This is called Trump-style negotiation. Is it annoying? Sure. Has it been said a lot? Sure. Is it real? Absolutely not. And everybody knows that. Mark Carney knows that. He absolutely does. And this is exactly why I use ground news. It lets me see how a story is being reported across the political spectrum, left, center, and right, so that I'm not always stuck in someone else's narrative. Their bias checker is seriously one of the greatest features because it perfectly lays out everything for you, showing you how the left is using this to fuel Trump's narrative and to fuel how scary and dangerous it is, while the right is kind of, just talking about this Golden Dome system and the protection ultimatums here. Center coverage has some partisan tones, focusing on more of the factual diplomatic context, including official cost estimates, which are omitted in most of the partisan reports. The problem here, though, with news in Canada is that most of us only hear one side of the story, and that's where Ground's blind spot feature is an absolute game changer. Whether you lean left or right, we all miss stories that don't fit our bubble, and Ground makes sure that you don't. So if you are tired of media bias and censorship getting half of the story or those really important omitted details, go to ground.news/Jasmine or scan the QR code on screen to get 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. That's ground.news/Jasmine, and see the whole picture for yourself. You can get the links for all of that in the description below.
That reliance, we are seeing the danger of over-reliance on the United States economically and also from a security perspective. So we will, as I said the other day, we will cooperate where necessary, when it's in both of our interests very clearly, but we won't necessarily cooperate. So we, as a confident country, with an ambitious plan, we look outwards. We look to Europe, we look to Asia, we look to new partners that we're going to deepen with. And that's a big element of what we're laying out in the speech.
Now, here's why, the facts as to why that is a nice fantasy, but it is just not realistic at all. And it's also why we haven't been doing those things this entire time. There is almost no demand for Canadian goods when it comes to exporting things and building stronger relationships with Asia and the UK. Sure, they may go ahead and say that they want to do that, but trade with Europe requires Atlantic shipping lanes that are seasonally restricted, by the way, and also less efficient than trucking across the border or even shipping to the United States, because the shipping routes are very long, the transport costs are very high, and also the carbon emissions are substantially what they are with the US. So it's like you have this double-edged sword here where you're trying to manipulate or theorize how you could pull this off, but doing so goes against everything that you claim to want to do. It goes against bringing down emissions, and it goes against the Canadian economy. Why would we spend more to ship elsewhere when we have a neighbor who actually uses and wants what we have, despite what Donald Trump has said that we don't need it? Sure, maybe in another 10 years, the US may not need it. Why is it, though, that Canada isn't trying to do our darndest to do all of those same things for our same country, like what Donald Trump is proposing to do?
Not good enough to say what you intend to do. You have to provide some kind of a roadmap to get there. And remember, the Prime Minister has set the bar extremely high. The only parts that were even remotely decent in the throne speech, of course, were plagiarized from conservative policies that we've been fighting for and they've been fighting against for a decade.
And let's not forget the most important detail of all of this, because this isn't about trade. This is about fully executing an ideological pivot of which Mark Carney, his investments, his life plans, seriously, life plans, I know, have been about, which is he is now able to cement the idea that Canada needs a carbon tax by locking Canada into the global ESG frameworks, because he says that, oh, well, we will then have to comply with the EU style regulation. We'll have to comply with what Asia is not even close to actually approving, but has been talking about doing. There's a very specific, particular reason why he keeps saying the EU and Asia. And it's because both of those countries are either looking into it or are already operating on some sort of a carbon tax system. So this gives Mark Carney the necessary reason why Canada must apply one of those. It has nothing to do with this at all. At all. Nope. It's just a natural thing that's taking place in the environment right now, the trade environment. And so rather than choosing to work within Donald Trump and our biggest trading partner, which, you know, what does Donald Trump say? He says that he wants less tariffs. He wants better trade. He wants things to be more affordable for both of us. He wants things to be easier for both of us. That sounds pretty great to accomplish, doesn't it? Rather than work within that, Mark Carney is proposing that we are going to instead spend way more money to try and do this thing with Europe and the EU. It's going to cost us an arm and a leg. It's going to take way longer. There's all sorts of hurdles and regulations, but he wants to go that route instead, not because it's better for us, not because the United States is actually such a villain, not because the United States is actually so unbelievably unreliable, but because of his ideology. Don't forget that when he talks about these things.
On homes at or under $1 million for first-time home buyers, delivering savings of up to $50,000. And it will lower the GST on homes between $1 million and $1.5 million. Le gouvernement assurera la pérennité.
The government will ensure the sustainability of programs that allow families to save thousands of dollars each year.
Funny enough, though, while Mark Carney did this as some big, oh, look at how cool I am, 83% of Canadians, according to the Angus Reid Institute, don't care. They're indifferent about King Charles reading the speech from the throne. That speech that it cost taxpayers approximately $1.2 to $1.3 million in accommodations just to have him come here to do. So Mark Carney says, oh yeah, we're gonna spend so much better. Well, you're already off to an absolutely terrible start, my guy. Also, just out of curiosity, because I don't live terribly far away from it, I decided to take a drive to our legislative building yesterday in Manitoba. And yes, the Queen Victoria statue is still removed after mass protests that took place during the Every Child Matters movement, where they decapitated the statue and ripped it down. There's rumors actually that the head of the Queen Victoria statue is somewhere in the river that runs through the city. I don't know if that's true, but if somebody can tell me, I'd love to know. But it's just one of those things where, what is this? Like, this is so fake. It's so hypocritical. It's unfathomable, actually, that just a few years ago, you have all of these people who say that they're done with the monarchy because of their involvement in residential schools, because of their involvement in taking Canada. And then everybody, the same people who were outraged over that, just don't care anymore because now Mark Carney told them that King Charles is good, the monarchy's good, Canada's sovereign, and King Charles represents that. What? Excuse me. Like, be consistent. Holy crap, if there's anything I could ask from the left, it's consistency.
And we were looking for that promise and that hope in this speech today. We did see a lot of the right slogans and political talking points, but no clear plans to get it done. One slogan dealt with controlling government spending, but there were no specific savings to roll back the morbidly obese Liberal government's costs. We saw promises about getting things built, but no mention of oil and gas or pipelines. Pipelines are, of course, the thing we most need to build. Didn't get one mention. nor did they mention getting rid of the anti-energy laws that have kept our resources in the ground. C-69, the no development law, C-48, the shipping ban, the energy cap, the electric vehicle mandate. All of these things were left out of the speech altogether. No specific plans to get anything done, even though, as the Prime Minister has said, we are in a crisis to break our dependence on the American economy.
Before we get into Melissa Lantsman getting grilled by CTV, only to then really flip the script in such a brilliant fashion, I wanted to point you to Blanchette, who is the leader of the Bloc Québécois, and he was asked about the NDP not getting official party status, and his response was just hilarious in typical Frenchman fashion.
In the House for debate.
I'm sorry?
Do you support the New Democrats getting slots on committee or having time in the House of Commons for debate?
I will certainly not support any ideas such as the NPD having any seat in the committees, because it is our balance of power. I will protect it quite seriously. However, there might be conversation about the resources that might be devoted to them. It's not done with so much enthusiasm, but I believe that we have to say, okay, what is it you want? What's in it for the rest of us?
Now, what I'm very curious about to see whether or not the NDP turns into what the Green Party is, where there's one seat, where they're essentially irrelevant, that would completely change our electoral system. So I'll be keeping an eye on that one. And another thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on over the next 4 years is the mainstream media and their questions to certain parties who don't pay their bills, and the line of the narratives that they draw, the things that they press them on.
I wanted to pick up on something you talked about, and sort of that I heard a lot from the leader in the House, Andrew Scheer, today, kind of roasting the government for taking ideas that the Conservative Party had put forward. Shouldn't your party be happy that those are being pursued rather than kind of dismissive of the government for picking up what you would characterize as good ideas?
We're certainly not dismissive of the government, but you have Mark Carney, who always, who on the campaign trail said that a plan is better than no plan, and we have yet to see a plan. So we're going to push for them to put a budget. Budget is a plan. First of all, throne speech is not a plan. It is a set of priorities. So we want to see an actual plan on the table, and if those include conservative ideas, then we encourage them to take more of those.
So why are you making fun of them for doing so?
Oh, I don't know. Could it be because they've ran over a decade of just scrutinizing, vilifying, ostracizing conservatives, calling us cold, cruel, and ugly, calling us misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theorists? Maybe that could be why. Because it turns out that even though they want to keep running on this platform of conservatives are so bad and scary and dangerous, we're going to take all of their ideas because, in fact, what we are trying to manipulate the public into believing is not true, then using those same ideas. Maybe that's why.
Well, look, I think that they've taken those ideas, or at least they said they've taken those ideas, but we haven't seen legislation yet that takes the burden of the carbon tax off the table. We haven't seen the elimination of that carbon tax. We haven't seen anything on crime, on the chaos, on the drugs, on the disorder in our streets. We certainly haven't seen a middle-class tax cut yet. I understand that the House is coming. So when we see those solutions, and if they happen to be conservative solutions, then we'll encourage him to take those ideas and run with them.
What does it say about your party that Canadians ultimately, a majority of Canadians decided they'd rather see the Liberals implement those ideas than your party?
I have a bit of a love-hate with Vassy Kapelos, but this one is just very obvious. Perhaps it's people like yourself, Miss CTV. Perhaps it's the people on CBC. Perhaps it is the way that things are misleading, manipulated, omitted, and absolutely lied about and smeared to prop up the Liberals because that is who's paying you. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's the biggest takeaway for why people would rather see the Liberal Party do those things than the Conservative Party, because over the last 30 plus years, only 9 years of those have been by a conservative government. The rest have been under liberal rule. So maybe it's because that party, the liberal establishment, has such a tight grip on all communications, made even stronger by Bill C-11, C-18, and the upcoming C-63. Maybe that is the biggest takeaway, is just how strong the establishment elites are in this country, how propagandized, how manipulated the public is due to platforms of which claim that they are unbiased and then proceed to show their bias in absolutely everything that they do.
Yeah, look, I think we've got a mission ahead of us, and it is 5 clear priorities of reducing the cost of living, of making sure that we build affordable homes in this country, reduce the cost of building and the regulation around it, that we do something on immigration, a system that has been broken by the Liberals, that we address crime, and most importantly, that we grow the economy, that we attract investment in this country. That's what we're going to go back to the House with. That's what we're going to start the session with. That's what we're going to advocate for Canadians. And more than that, we'll show them that there is a government in waiting. We'll restore hope for those who, felt like this in December and certainly still felt like this on Election Day. Those 8 million people that voted for Conservatives. We have a responsibility to them and to instill hope and change. And if it is pushing the Liberals to do that, that's exactly what we're going to be here to do.
But with all due respect, my question was about why Canadians ultimately in this election did not think that you were more than a government in waiting.
Well,
and even what you outlined, the things that you just talked about are very much what we hear from Prime Minister Carney and from the Liberals. And ultimately, there was a difference, right? Yes, a record number of Canadians voted free, but a record number of Canadians voted for the Liberals as well. Like, what kind of introspection has your party done on why that is the case?
Yeah, look, I think anytime you win or lose an election, there are things to look at about what you can do better. But going into the House and going into the session and going into the year, we're going to advocate for those things on Canadians. And if Mark Carney wants to talk about these things, that's one thing. But we want to see implementation. And I think the judgment of that from Canadians will be if he's able to implement, if he's able to deliver results. And right now we actually see the opposite of that. We've got ministers sort of freelancing about housing prices not having to go down, about not building pipelines, about working from home, and we see the government's first order of business is not to present a budget in a timely way for Canadians. So I think Canadians will be the judge of this government, and will continue to be the vigorous opposition and scrutinize the legislation that comes to the House.
And look, I do take your points on all that you just pointed about the government. I've asked the ministers the very same questions around accountability on all of that. But you kind of brushed aside my question about your own party's role in the outcome. And I'll put to you, look at all the shadow ministers. Everybody's in basically the same position. Nobody will really talk about, what kind of introspection you're doing or that you even really fell short. Like, what is the consequence of the election outcome for your party? And it's not just that you lost. It's that you lost when 6 months ago you were going to win.
Look, I think that, again, every time a party wins or loses, there's introspection that needs to happen, and the details of what that looks like will certainly make that clear to you when we decide sort of how to go about it. But I think there's been lots of introspection.
Speaking of misinformation, apparently I am just filled with it. So this article was written by the Canadian Press, Canada's trusted news leader. I want you to remember that, by a lady named Marissa Burney, who I'm sure is no fan of mine, used to formerly work for the Toronto Star, or maybe still currently writes for them. You gotta love these fact checkers, I tell ya. This article reads, pamphlet sparks false claims about MAID for minors in Canada. Goes on to say that it's all about MAID for children's and teens, MAID for mental illness, spread on social media, along with misleading claims about medical assistance in dying, MAID for mature minors. Canadian politics influencer Jasmine Lane posted the pamphlet on X. And so essentially, if you don't follow me on X, which you should in case YouTube ever gets taken down, this pamphlet was from an evangelical group who said that this is what's coming in the expansion. because it is what's coming in the expansion. It's what they are currently lobbying for. It goes on to say that following Lane's ex post, photos of the pamphlet spread on other social media along with claims about MAID for minors. Several American conspiracy theory platforms, oh, I love that word, picked up the story claiming that the pamphlet supported MAID access for minors with mental health issues, which in fact, no, it wasn't. It was a very brilliant way of highlighting here's everything that they're trying to do right now. Oh boy, but here's my favorite part. The fact check rating of this is false. I cannot wait to get into this one. The pamphlet itself is advocating against MAID for mature minors, not promoting it. Yep, that was a given. It also goes on to say that there's no evidence of government pursuing MAID access for mature minors. Now, of course, they went and asked the experts of whom you should trust, where they proceeded to say MAID for mature minors is not legal, has never been legal, and is not currently being discussed as a possibility. Anybody who is suggesting otherwise is misleading the public, Green said this week. She said the report's recommendations were for exploratory actions and not a direct pathway to changing MAID legislation to include minors. You know, before we totally fact check the fact check, I want to also add here, using the left's own logic, you know how they say things all the time like, oh, well, conservatives are anti-abortion. They're against women's rights. Oh, well, that bill that took place, you know, after that woman who was murdered and was pregnant, and then they wanted to increase, you know, penalties for people who murder pregnant women. Yeah, well, that's a gateway. It's opening up a pathway. So it's bad. So they're bad. And then by using their own logic, though, they quite literally say, yeah, we're looking into it, but it's not a pathway. Just again, consistency, please. Is it really that hard? However, let's go through this. Why don't we? Well, here I am on Dying with Dignity's own website where it says, with the appropriate safeguards in place, mature minors should be allowed the right to choose MAID. Goes on to say that this includes the right to consent or refuse life-saving medical treatment with special eligibility criteria and appropriate safeguards in place. Dying with Dignity Canada believes mature minors should be allowed the right to choose MAID. That is very contradictory, is it not? They also boast on here with this Ipsos poll, 2023, that 71% of people across Canada support the ability for mature minors to request and be considered for MAID if all other criteria are met under law. Well, that certainly does sound an awful lot like you are trying to make it happen now, doesn't it? I also think it's very important to note that MAID actually has conferences. And so in 2024, their conference itinerary included MAID and mental disorder comorbidities. It also included MAID and mature minors, a panel discussion. Let's just click into the details of that, shall we? Session details, where this one line right here says, discuss the potential expansion of MAID to mature minors, exploring ethical, medical, practical complexities of this decision and its potential impact on healthcare policies and practices. Weird, because she said that anybody who is suggesting otherwise is misleading the public. It's never been legal and it's not even being discussed as a possibility. Well, if that's the case, then why would your panelists include people like Michelle Mullen, who is an associate professor of pediatrics, bioethicist at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario? Why would it include people like Dr. Adam Rappaport, who is a physician at the Hospital for Sick Children? Weird, isn't it? So yes, according to this fact check by Marissa Burney, this was all false news, right? Yeah, it's totally fake. Nobody's talking about this stuff. It is not happening at all, guys. You know, their advocacy efforts are just a part of more conversations and not at all to turn it into law. But as my dear friend, Miss Kelsey Sharon, has to say, this is happening behind closed doors and is being lobbied to have put in place. This is called proactive stopping bullshit before it becomes law. Yeah, I mean, whoever got that fact-checking job really does need to just read what is publicly available. Maybe just do research instead of just say what lobbyist groups are telling you to say. maybe that would be good because, you know, the AP and also DWDC did not disprove this pamphlet at all. What they did, in fact, was misrepresent it because the pamphlet didn't claim that MAID for minors was legal. It warned that there are influential medical professionals, government lobbyists, and advocates who are preparing arguments to expand it. That included at high-level conferences, and the evidence of which I just showed you proves that beyond question. And if you don't think that that was enough information for you to think, the Canadian press, Canada's trusted news leader, was maybe not to be trusted with this one, I could do probably an hour-plus long episode just showing you all of the other recordings and screenshots that I do have because MAID is something I have been actively against since I lost the man of whom I spent 10 years of my life with to a very, very unfortunate fate that forever changed the rest of my life and the rest of everybody else who was so honored and lucky to have him in their lives.